Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Be me. Have long curly hair that either looks like Goldilocks or Lord of the Flies, nothing in between. Super skinny, but with lean definition. Wear skin-tight clothing and a beanie. Have a day off work. Decide to just pick a direction and drive after eating breakfast. Take my K-bar knife with me. After getting out into the edges of some suburban area, pull out the phone. Search for the nearest nature trail. Find some random one next to some weird land development where they're digging out a huge gulch for what looks like a dam. Park next to the trail entrance. Get out, and then walk towards the trail. Only one other car. Silver Nissan sedan parked directly in front of it with some fat old codger sitting in the driver's dude is just staring forwards at the trail. His head snaps to me as I pass his car to enter the trail. Just ignore him. Enjoy the walk at first. Make it about a quarter mile in and pass a few side trails. Suddenly hear shuffling against the pavement behind me, followed by the sound of out-of-breath huffing. Slightly turn my head back and see an obese codger intently looking at me while one hand is on his chest, and the other is fumbling around his waistline as if reaching for something. Get creeped out, walk a bit faster, and dip down the next side trail that pops up. Make it about 20 yards up into the side trail, where I meet a fork that looks to loop to a point earlier in the trail. Stop walking to see if he is following me. He comes up the part of the trail that loops back to the beginning, absolutely panting his ass off. Dip down the other fork, which leads to an access way for electrical towers. He gets a good look at my knife and face when I run off. Looks absolutely surprised. Follow it back to the road, and then the parking lot for the trail. His car is gone. Instead of leaving, walk in the middle of a grass patch and watch some buzzards circle over the nearby gulch. A guy pulls up with his kids in a black sedan. Goes on about life and how you should enjoy it regardless of your fears. Leaves, saying he's going fishing with his kids. Feel a bit motivated. Go back and walk the trail for an hour or so. When I leave, there's two new cars, a newer Explorer with a couple in jogger attire. The other car is an old red Camry, and the dude is sitting in the passenger seat with a pair of sunglasses. Hits the shoulder of some hag Aldo with sunglasses in the driver's seat. They both glare daggers at me as I get in my car and leave. Probably thought I was a woman he could easily assault due to my size and hair. Probably dipped out for a bit to try his luck again later.
Phone posting. Be me. Around 7 or 8 years old. Dad stationed in Fort Irwin, California. Takes me and my brother out into the desert to hunt for treasure. Lots of fun. Find all sorts of cool things. One weekend, a big group of my dad and his friends and their kids. Around 3 or 4 dads and maybe 8 kids. Driving through the desert and eventually stopping by what I was told was an old mine. Explore the area with my brother and start to walk towards the mine. Don't get too close, anon, could be dangerous. Old mine, rocks could fall. Checks out. Glance at the cave entrance. 3 sets of glowing red orbs. Dad, what are those? Dad looks. What the actual hell? JPG. All of a sudden, the dads are in full GTFO mode. We pack up and skedaddle. Ask Dad on the way back home what those were. They looked like red eyes. Oh, those were reflectors so people don't wander into mine shafts. It made sense at the time, but I know I was being lied to. My dad won't talk about it. Can't find any info, but 30 years later I still remember those red eyes staring at me from the cave.
Be me in 2015. Sleeping as one does. Have a dream about a Native American man named Maxie. Have never met anyone by that name or description. Think nothing of it but remember that dream vividly. Years later, visiting my aunt. Grandmother lives with her. Early stages of dementia, sometimes lucid, sometimes not. Sitting with grandmother, vibing. She's watching game shows as she always does, petting the orange cat she's had for as long as I can remember. She mutes the TV, asks me if she's ever told me about my mom's first husband. I'm unaware that my mom was married before. Ask her to tell me since she brought it up. She tells me about how my mom married a Native American boy in the early 90s. Cool, didn't know that. Aunt comes into the room. Grandmother asks what the boy's name was. I don't remember. What? Goes on to tell me that they weren't married for long and divorced after a year. She married my dad later on. Grandmother tells me that she doesn't think my dad is my real dad. Aunt tells her to stop being crazy. Weird. A week later, I'm back at home. Aunt calls me in tears. Tells me that after they divorced, my mom kept sleeping with her ex, even while married to my dad. Goes on to say that this mystery guy is my real dad. Don't believe it at first, but then shit starts to make sense. It explains why I don't look like anyone else in my family. Ask if she remembered his name just to make sure. Maxie. She also tells me he died in 2015. The face when the man that might be my biological father visited me in my dreams the same year he died.
Heard this story from my good friend from high school. His brother and mom also confirmed to me that the incident happened. His dad refuses to ever talk about it. Friend is 11 or 12 years old. His brother is 2 years younger. Parents are very normal. Straight-laced boomers. His family moved to Jefferson County, Missouri, about 30 minutes outside St. Louis, from another state. House is in a secluded area, big property, with no immediate neighbors. Parents go out one night and leave the boys home alone. Come home a few hours later, walk into the house. 2 tall humanoid creatures are standing in their kitchen, staring at them. Like a cross between gray aliens and humans, both are naked. His mom showed me a crude drawing she made of them. Both parents immediately freak out, run out of the kitchen to look for the boys. Mom finds them in my friend's bedroom. They're playing video games and have no idea what's going on. Dad only left the kitchen for maybe 10 seconds, but the humanoids are gone without a trace. They call the police, who come and find no signs of a break-in. They sold the house a couple years later, and nothing else weird ever happened. I've been listening to a lot of old Open Lines episodes of Art Bell era Coast to Coast AM lately, and there are a decent amount of callers from Jefferson County who have stories about various paranormal stuff in that area. It's a hot spot for sure.
Saw Sasquatch once, but it was fairly anticlimactic. Happened a good 20-ish years back now in early 2000s. Be mid-20s with my then girlfriend, now my wife. Off-roading an old shit-kicked K10. Scouting around behind Squamish on logging and FSR trails looking for places to camp with larger A group later. The area then is not like it is now. You would sometimes see other people off-roading, but it wasn't the crowded mess it has been since 2010. Truck runs okay, but the exhaust is a rotting piece of shit, rumbling along one road that is getting narrower and rougher as we go. We are way up the Alaho Valley at this point. Sure enough, hear a clank and a dragging noise after one too many bounces. Stop the truck and investigate. Exhaust has broken just past the rear axle. Last elbow is hanging and dragging on the ground. Time for redneckengineering.jpg. Grab some twine from the bed to rig the hanging part back up. Waiting for the exhaust to cool off, getting teased by my girlfriend. Suddenly hear a very loud yell. Sounded deep, like the sound a man would make deadlifting. Like a ooh-wah. Sounded like it came from way down the valley. Everything gets super quiet. Only sound is faintly of the river. Exchange looks with my girlfriend. Assume it was someone lurking about closer to the river. Rig up the exhaust and carry on. Further on, bouncing about. Hear familiar clank and dragging. Get out of the truck. My girlfriend is having a field day. Get roasted for a few while waiting for the pipe to cool again. Knelt down beside the truck, assessing the situation. Suddenly, girlfriend gasps out my name and grabs onto me from above with a death grip. Look up to see what's up. See a large, dark brown mass over the edge of the road about 20 to 30 meters in front of the truck, leaning out from behind a tree. My first thought was that it was a bear until I realized what I was looking at had a humanoid face. It had a really prominent ridge over its eyes, which shadowed them, making it impossible to see detail. The nose was flat but fairly well defined and looked almost slightly upturned. The mouth had almost a muzzle to it, like Homer Simpson, but it jutted out in front of its face slightly, near parallel with the end of its nose. I am literally dumbfounded by what I'm looking at, just staring for what feels like an eternity. Eventually it makes a weird sort of snort and steps away from behind the tree before ambling back down the hill. Get look at it as it wanders off. Huge, 7 to 8 feet tall easy. Turn back to the truck, grab exhaust and wrench it clean off. Was thankfully easy due to being 90% rotted off anyways. Get back in the truck and drive off down the valley and back to civilization. The weirdest thing was it was really not that scary. Or at least not paranormal scary. It was perturbing looking at an animal that size, but it wasn't exactly gesturing aggressively, and it left back down the hill and out of sight on its own. If anything, I'm honestly curious to see one again, but in all the time since then roaming the area, I've never seen one since. Sorry it's anticlimactic, but I know what I saw.
Camping in the middle of nowhere, Arkansas. Sitting on ridge, forest on one side, and a somewhat steep bluff that drops off on the other, doing a final check of my pole and tackle for some night fishing at a nearby lake. Notice a bright blue light on the horizon. Look back down and keep fumbling with my tackle. After a couple minutes, look back up and notice it's gotten brighter. Huh, odd. Stand up facing the horizon and bluff edge, noticing that it's actively getting ridiculously bright. Something in my head finally clicked and realized it might be getting brighter because it's getting closer. Unexplainable sense of urgency and dread fills me, causing me to dig my pistol out of my pack along with my phone. Steady my hand and try to take a photo. The blue light suddenly zips right to left and back again. It darts overhead and my head began to feel like it was being squeezed. The object goes into a tree line, then back overhead numerous times over the span of a few minutes. It's insanely fast. I scramble for the cover of the trees, and by this point my head feels like it's going to implode. I woke up next morning at the bottom of the bluff being checked out by a game warden and medical rescue with no memory of how I got down there. "Anon, we found your camp up there. Have you been drinking or doing drugs? We think you tripped and fell. Get evaluated at hospital. Aside from a fractured rib, ankle, and bruised back, the only noteworthy injury is a chemical rash on my back and shoulder that resembled sunburn and cleared up in a few days. Never told a soul and never seen anything like it again."
Weird shit happened to my dad last week. Little bit of a backstory here. Our family business is a printery. It's an old building 4 floors high, including a large attic and basement. Throughout the years, people have all experienced strange things there. I'll sum a few up. Mom's in the kitchen with a friend of hers. They suddenly hear footsteps and a door opens up on the first floor. It's probably my husband, my dad. 1 minute later, my dad drives up in the parking lot. They were the only people there as it was Saturday. The printery also had a teacher for teaching kids typing. He was Indonesian, so that may have contributed to some fear. Always left before the kids did as he was afraid of the stairs over there, said there was something bad there. Me and my sister do some photo editing in the evening, start shooting pictures of products. At around 8 p.m., we go to the first floor for some photo editing. 20 minutes later, we started hearing footsteps at the stairs, of which the teacher was afraid to go near. It's past 8 o'clock, there shouldn't be anyone in this building, let alone on the stairs leading to the attic. Start hearing the footsteps every minute or so. We start noping. If I were there alone, I would have turned off the PC in an instant. Dad calls if he should pick us up. We agree. 3 minutes later, we hear actual angry footsteps on those stairs, like loud as hell as to actually tell us to fuck off. We quickly go downstairs and Dad has already arrived. Tell him everything. Now we haven't heard much from any ghosts or spooks for a few years. We thought they were gone, until last week, that is. My dad's working late to finish a few magazines for this company. Suddenly he feels a presence like someone's behind him. Turn around. There was this pitch-black man standing behind him. No facial features at all, might have been some kind of silhouette, but clearly he's seen it well enough to make out it looked like a large man. Yells something like, "God damn it, you scared me." Vanishes within a second. We had some relatives who were psychic come over once to take a walk through the building. They were greeted by a proud spirit, presumed to be my grandfather as he showed them all of his paintings. Later on, when they got near the stairs, they said it had a bad aura. They were both screaming when they entered the basement, though, as they saw something dark down there. Was it a shade? Any advice from professional ghost hunters would be appreciated.
This one's sorta underwhelming, but at least it's real. Be me, high schooler, July 2016. Have an important exam at school on a Saturday morning. Finish exam and head home with 3 friends. We're riding bikes to the woods near my house. Not all woods, but a very large area of meadows intertwined with forests. Lots of trails and cyclists. Spend the afternoon riding with them. It's now close to 6 p.m., and I lead the path. My friends are tired and lag behind. I'm ahead by almost half a mile, and finally stop when the path forked. To the left, the path goes among the low grass. To the right, it goes side by side with the dense forest. As I wait by the forest, someone starts coughing and moaning. Sounds like an old man. He just coughs and sighs for almost a minute straight. I say, "Hey man, you all right?" thinking it's some weary cyclist. Look around after hearing no response, only to realize the sounds came from the woods. It's getting dark, and I can't see even 3 meters into the forest. Well, there's gotta be some path I don't know about in there. Poor dude, he probably can't see shit in there. My friends finally come. I tell them about this, and they get weirded out, but we forget about it and go home. Months later, I remembered what happened and kind of freak out. After several other incursions across the area, I finally understood that there aren't any paths or trails in that area, and that the vegetation is so dense you couldn't actually just walk around there, at least not without lights and a lot of noise, none of which happened. To this day, I have no idea what the hell was that.
This incident happened to my pal John. In the 90s, John was an IT guy in parts of eastern Iowa and far west Illinois. He was used to driving from one account to another either late at night or early in the morning. He'd pick a halfway point to use a rest stop and to grab one of those awful paper cup coffees from the machines while he was there. One early morning about 4:30 a.m. he was in Iowa, and he stopped at a wide spot in the road rest stop. He parked, and there weren't any other people there except for a couple of semis who looked like they had been there for quite a while. He went into the men's room and it was deserted. He used the bathroom and went to the sink to wash his hands. He said he caught some movement from the corner of his eye, and there was a very tall, very thin man standing right in the middle of the entrance about 15 feet away. He was dressed all in black, and he says that the guy's eyes were pitch black. The man was giggling to himself, and John swore he was nearly 7 feet tall. This incident happened to my pal John. In the 90s, John was an IT guy in parts of eastern Iowa and far west Illinois. He was used to driving from one account to another either late at night or early in the morning. He'd pick a halfway point to use a rest stop and to grab one of those awful paper cup coffees from the machines while he was there. One early morning about 4:30 a.m. he was in Iowa, and he stopped at a wide spot in the road rest stop. He parked, and there weren't any other people there except for a couple of semis who looked like they had been there for quite a while. He went into the men's room and it was deserted. He used the bathroom and went to the sink to wash his hands. He said he caught some movement from the corner of his eye, and there was a very tall, very thin man standing right in the middle of the entrance about 15 feet away. He was dressed all in black, and he says that the guy's eyes were pitch black. The man was giggling to himself, and John swore he was nearly 7 feet tall.
This was back in the late 90s when 2 of my friends and I were staying at their vacation home. along one of the local rivers in South Carolina. The house, think 3 small bedrooms, a sitting room, kitchen, and a small external bathroom, is on a privately owned island not theirs, which is used for cattle grazing and is about 3 to 4 square miles in area. It is accessible by only one dirt road, which takes all of about 30 minutes to travel down, as it bends and winds through dense cypress swamps, full of alligators and marsh plains. Along the road there is one other house, just as you get onto the island, which has long been abandoned. This old 2-story plantation-style home was supposedly abandoned when the owner's child suffered a fatal accident, and they couldn't stand being there anymore. Aside from my friend's house, the cattle farmer's home, and one other vacation home, the abandoned property is the only other structure. While my friends and I were out on the dock doing some night fishing, trying to land something to throw on the grill, but we hadn't had much luck. The river was as smooth as glass, which was really unusual because of where the dock is. The current there is usually very strong, even during the tide shift. We sat and chatted, waiting for a bite, up until about 11 p.m. Then off to our right, towards the coast, we heard a loud tone or wail, which sounded like a mix between a ship's horn and maybe a wolf howl or something similar. An important note, the island is, by car, nearly an hour from deep water access, and probably more from the actual ocean, so the likelihood that the sound was a large ship is low. So anyway, we were startled by the sound, and even my friend, who had been spending his summers there since he was in diapers, had never heard the noise before and was bothered by it. So we decided to pack it in since we weren't catching anything anyway, and had nearly gotten all our equipment back to the house when my second friend heard it. Coming from down the road, back towards the island access, was what sounded either like a cat meowing or a child crying. We all stood in silence listening and trying to figure out what it was and where it was coming from. After listening for about 5 minutes, we decided to hop in the truck and drive down the road, with the windows down, so we could try and find what was making the sound. What started out sounding like a cat was made clear as we got further up the road. That was not the case. We could clearly hear a child, and it sounded like it was saying, "Help me." We drove very slowly, calling out, and we'd wait a few minutes and hear "Help me" again, but always further up the road, towards the swamps and the old abandoned house. We were seriously freaked out, because if there was a kid out there, why would they be going away from our calls and light into the swamp? We nearly made it all the way to the abandoned house when the sound just stopped. We waited for nearly an hour and never heard it again. We marked it up as nerves and headed back to the river house, assuming it had been an animal after all, and that we were probably just imagining it saying words. After we had gotten back inside and settled in for the night, we started hearing it again, but as time passed, it came closer to us. We went out and called out again, and the sound would come closer. This went on for hours. Well, we decided we would try one more time to see if there was a kid lost or something. Again, important to note, we are miles from the next nearest people and the noise sounded like a child, think 4-year-old. But once we got out in the truck again, the noise stopped. It was now nearly 3 in the morning, and we had been out in the sun fishing and swimming all day, so we were all tired after driving around a bit, calling out again with no luck. We decided to give up. We get back inside again and get into our beds. Then we heard it, clear as a bell, "Help me," right outside the house, but it sounded so strange like it was an echo. If that makes sense, like it was close but far away too. None of us were brave enough to go commando and leave the house, but we went out onto the porch, which was screened in for bugs, and listened. As soon as we went out, it would stop. Go back into the beds, it would call out again, but in a different location outside the house. It circled the house, calling, all night. We all slept in the living room, but to be honest, there wasn't a lot of sleeping happening. In the morning, we went out and looked for tracks around the house, as the foundation is basically sand. There wasn't a mark, no prints, animal or otherwise, and to the best of my knowledge, this never happened again to my friend or any other visitors. To this day, we don't know what we heard, but it's probably the most supernatural occurrence I've experienced.
Not really a paranormal story since it involves drug use, but it's kinda spooky and I still think about it a lot. Be young and stupid, decide to smoke skooma. Felt almost nothing the first 2 times. Smoke it for a 3rd time, deep inhale, massive hit. Instantly fall through a fractal portal of undulating yellow and blue light. Come back to reality, I'm on the floor of my bathroom. However, I am tiny and the tiles stretch on forever. The bathroom disappears. I'm on a different planet near a city made of geometric light blocks. I went into the city, but I don't remember what happened. After leaving the city, I roamed a Martian-like world for what felt like 25 years. It was absolutely barren with only rocks, no life other than myself here. I just walked around looking for anything. Suddenly I look up into the night sky. It's my then-girlfriend's face. She's the entire sky. Her eyes are filled with stars. She's trying to speak to me, but I don't understand. Now here's the part that really stuck with me and felt paranormal. Her face vanishes. These 3 giant hat-man-looking silhouettes appeared, their waiting stretching from behind the horizon. They weren't quite like Hat-Man, but they had pointy heads with 2 sides jutting out from where their temples would be, giving them a 4-star-shaped head. I get a gut feeling I can't trust them. The middle one talks in a language that is incomprehensible to me. It then said, "You are a spy." In my hands appeared a large stack of papers. Printed on each of them were pictures of the Earth and North America. The middle one reaches with his massive shadow arm stretching across the entire sky and picks me up. He hurls me into the atmosphere. I feel like I'm traveling faster than light. I see just streaks of light as I just speed past everything. Suddenly I see the Earth. I'm then racing through the atmosphere. My POV looks like when you zoom in on Google Earth. I go through the roof of my house and then back into my body. I woke up in my bathroom. My then GF there asking me if I was okay. I brushed her off quickly and told her I was fine. I could see those papers still in my hands, but they were turning transparent and fading away from reality. I feel slightly panicked that I couldn't remember or understand what the giant shadow man had said to me. It felt like an urgent message. A little bit later, I feel mostly fine, just kind of dazed. Asked my GF how long I was tripping. It was only about 3 minutes, which surprised me because it felt like it had been years. I know it's not really a supernatural story, but it's something that has really stuck with me, and it felt like it actually happened. I genuinely feel like I lived on the world for decades, and sometimes I feel like my true age is much older than my biological age.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.